The bus climbed into the Blue Ridge at the tail end of a warm fall afternoon. It was a company retreat for Northfield Analytics, half team building and half escape from spreadsheets. The old lodge sat above a patchwork of red maples and worn stone walls, the kind of place with rocking chairs on the porch and a sign in the bar that said "Take it slow." Rachel had claimed a window seat and then slipped into silence as if the hills could hide her thoughts. Andrew took the spot beside her and pretended not to feel the small stiffness in her shoulders. He was her husband, the father of their 2 boys, and lately the meter of her breathing at night had been offbeat. Inside the big dining hall, people sorted themselves by comfort and habit. Long wood table, heavy chairs, candles that smelled faintly of pine. Laughter rose and fell. Across from Andrew and Rachel sat the new guy, Miles Hart, tall, neat, a smile like he trusted the light to catch him well. The retreat was official on paper and extracurricular in spirit. Everybody remembered who laughed at the right time and who stayed late to help stack plates. Andrew noticed Rachel was not watching her plate. She was watching the space where Miles's voice lived. Kate from operations slid into the open chair next to Andrew and said in a low voice that sparks were obvious. She had seen them at the coffee machine and in the hallway by the printer. Both of them married, she added, then winced at herself for saying it out loud. Andrew asked if Miles was really married. Kate nodded. Wife's name was Laura. Worked somewhere across town. Pretty, nice, normal. The kind of detail that should have calmed a room and somehow didn't. Later, when dessert turned into small talk, the table drifted onto schools and professors. Miles named a Midwestern university and a famous professor. Andrew had kept in touch with alumni and asked 2 tidy questions about the department and an old required course. Miles's answers were foggy, not the gentle fog of time, the fog of someone guessing at landmarks he had never visited. Andrew filed it quietly in that drawer where he stored small facts that ended up matching. Night cooled the porch. The conversation stayed warm. Rachel looked at the bottles and told Andrew with a smile that tonight he could drink as much as he wanted and leave the rules for home. He said sure and poured once, then let the glass sit. He knew a lure when he saw one. It glittered just enough to tempt a fish that had lived long enough to know better. Close to 11, the sound system coughed. The tech kid poked at cables. Andrew, who still wore the engineer in his hands, swapped 2 leads, turned one dial the other way, and let the music die soft. People went looking for their jackets and keys. Rachel told him she would walk him to their room because he looked ready to fall over. He answered in a plain, steady voice that he was fine. For half a second her face misfired, then she reset the smile. They lay down, but sleep stayed in some other hall. When Rachel sat up, tied a robe, and reached for the door, Andrew asked where she was going. Out for air, she said. He pulled on a tracksuit and went with her. On the front steps, in the half-light, Miles smoked and watched the dark line of mountain. When he saw Rachel, he brightened. When he saw Andrew behind her, the brightness dimmed. Andrew nodded and asked why Laura had not come up. It was the first time he said her name. Rachel's head turned like she had not heard it before. Miles said his wife and kids were at her parents' on the coast. Then he killed the cigarette and said he needed sleep. Morning had the smell of coffee and wet leaves. The bus rolled down the ridge and through small towns, past a diner with a neon sign that flickered "Eat" like a command. Rachel stared through her reflection in the window. Andrew watched the line of her jaw and thought how a life can crack without one loud sound. Just a door left too open for too long. In Henrico, her parents waited with the boys. The kids told the story of how Grandma had found fresh morels at the farmer's market and fried a skillet full. Andrew thanked her and said they should be careful with wild mushrooms, especially for kids. The older boy asked if they could go to Grandpa's place in Ohio with the rods. Andrew checked the time, and said that if they packed fast, they could be in Ohio by 10 and at the lake by sunrise. Rachel reminded him about work. He said he had bank time and a vacation coming in 10 days. At home, the kitchen smelled like roasted chicken and a good, ordinary life. Andrew helped the boys finish their school projects while Rachel chopped salad. Then he set down his fork and spoke the way you speak when you want the words to be heard for what they are. I am not a child. I do not need confessions or oaths. I understand you like Miles. On that trip, I was an obstacle. I will not be your guard. My trust cracked. I am taking the boys to my parents for a week. What happens after depends on what I see when I come back. If he shows up in our home while I am gone, I will not ignore it. Rachel started to object, but the boys ran in yelling, "We're ready." Andrew stood, packed documents, a tracksuit, house slippers, kissed his sons, nodded to Rachel, and left. The road to Ohio untied the knot in his chest. Cornfields ran long. The sky learned how to be wide again, and the evening smelled like river and wood smoke. His parents, Frank and Mary, met them on the porch. Nets hung to dry. A coil of line sat in a cardboard box. The old pickup waited in the garage the way old dogs wait by doors. At first light, they walked into the woods. September loved mushrooms here. Frank taught the boys that you only eat what Grandpa knows, that you do not touch snakes, that a forest is not a theme park, but a home you visit with your hat in your hands. The boys chased a skinny snake across a sunlit rock, and Frank laughed and said, "We do not chase what we are not ready to live with." By noon, they brought back baskets. Mary said it would take all night to clean. Andrew said then they would do it together. Neighbors came through the gate to help, and work turned into the slow ritual that families remember. Some mushrooms went to the drying racks. The firmest whites went into clean jars with garlic and pepper. At 7, the gate clicked again. Rachel stood there. She said hello like someone stepping into a room where history waited. She asked where Andrew and the boys were. Mary wiped her hands on her apron and told her the community center had called about the old soundboard, and Andrew could never leave a crackling channel alone. Rachel nodded and walked to the brick building with the hand-painted sign that said community. Music floated in loops of light. Couples moved in slow circles. Andrew had already made the speakers behave. And yes, he was dancing. With him was Ellie, a compact woman in jeans and sneakers, his friend from high school. They looked like people who understood the shape of a boundary. Rachel felt heat climb her neck and kept her face still. Andrew saw her and did not change his step. The boys tried to pull Rachel onto the floor. She shook her head. When the song ended, Andrew bowed to Ellie and went to power down the board. After the hall emptied, he walked over and asked what was wrong. Rachel said nothing was wrong except that she had come to see her husband, and he was already dancing with a woman he knew. Andrew said Ellie was his classmate and neighbor, and that wedding vows counted in both directions. He added that by Friday he would have what he needed to decide whether he was still bound by his own. Rachel asked to talk now. He said after dinner at the house. The kitchen filled with the smell of potatoes, garlic, and pan heat. The boys went to bed. Mary washed pans. Rachel dried them and tried to keep her breath from hurrying. Frank had fallen asleep in his chair. When the kitchen was clean and quiet, Andrew said, "Tell me." Rachel did not ration the truth. She said she had taken comp time and a vacation block and had planned to resign at the end of it. She said she liked Miles and had let herself enjoy the attention. She said she had believed his smooth story about school and then watched him stumble over simple facts when Andrew asked. She said he had hidden being married. She said the drive home from the lodge and the first night alone in the house had cleared her eyes. She had written a memo and sent it to the CEO along with her requests for time off and possible resignation. HR called. Background checks started. Kate texted that Miles had dumped a resignation letter on someone's desk and vanished before payroll could cut him a check. He had called Rachel. She had not picked up. She said she had driven to Ohio because she did not want to wait a week to say the thing that needed saying. She asked for a chance. Andrew listened and said he was taking the boys fishing at dawn. She could come if she wanted. For now, they should sleep. Morning put a white ribbon of fog on the lake. Ducks stitched thin tracks through it. The boys learned how to sit still like they had always known how. Rachel arrived 10 minutes later in Andrew's old jacket. They fished and did not hurry their words. Sometimes silence gets more done than speech. The week in Ohio did not feel like a vacation. It felt like foundation work. Rachel cooked, helped Mary, walked fields with Frank, listened to stories about moles in the yard and the stubborn temper of apple trees. In the evenings, she and Andrew sat on the steps. He said he would not promise to forget. He said he would let new facts exist and be counted. She did not argue. She showed up. By Friday, HR sent an email. It said, in language that never raises its voice, that Miles's resume had material discrepancies, that his hire had been an error, that the company would tighten verification. That afternoon, Laura, Miles's wife, called Rachel. Her voice shook but did not break. She said she knew about his flirtations and was tired of lies. She asked Rachel not to answer if he called again. Rachel said she had already decided not to. Laura thanked her. The call stung and released at the same time. Back in Richmond, the house sounded like itself. Nothing was missing except the thin layer of pretending that sometimes settles on routines when people stop paying attention. Over the next months, Rachel went to therapy on Tuesdays, rebuilt her calendar, brought back evening walks and Saturday breakfasts on the porch. She stayed at Northfield. The CEO found words that were clear without being cruel. She found a new alignment. Andrew did not accuse. He also did not pretend. They spoke like adults past 40. They practiced. On some Saturdays, they drove back to Ohio. In fall, they picked apples. In winter, they helped Frank coax life from the old tractor. In spring, they caught the first trout. On Wednesdays, the community center kept holding dances. Andrew still fixed the sound when it hissed, and then asked Rachel to join him when the slow song came around. The boys howled from the bleachers. Andrew learned that some choices do not deliver a perfect ending, but can deliver an honest one. No one heard from Miles for months. Kate eventually said his wife had filed for divorce. Rumor had him in another state working construction under a different name. HR finished their process, updated the handbook, and ran a training on boundaries and power. Late, yes. Still worth doing. In spring, Rachel carried home white lilies. She set them in a glass vase without ceremony. Andrew moved the vase to the center of the table. The lilies opened slowly like they understood time cost something. The boys asked what the occasion was. Rachel said no occasion. Andrew said sometimes no occasion is the best one. In July, they drove north to Michigan. Those lakes feel like oceans, and the shore smells like pine. On the third morning, Andrew woke early and stood by the water. Light laid itself gently on the ripples. He realized their family was not what it had been and was more real for it. He did not fear the word trust anymore, though he spoke it softer. Rachel came up behind him, put a hand on his shoulder, and said she was grateful for the chance, for the boys, for this morning. He nodded. Sometimes a nod is the whole sentence. Fall returned as it always does. Northfield hung new posters about ethics and simple adult behavior. Rachel ran a project and stopped letting other people's paperwork stall on her desk. Kate joked that the company had developed an allergy to handsome liars. At night, Rachel found Andrew in the kitchen and asked if he was okay. He said yes. Sometimes he added that he was tired. Then they shut laptops and went to the porch. Their talk often braided with quiet, and quiet counted as speech. A year later, they visited Frank and Mary again. On the drive, the boys retold the snake story and argued about who held the rod the right way that day. At the center, Ellie waved and said she was glad to see them together. Rachel smiled, and asked if she wanted coffee later. Sometimes friendship grows where a fence used to be. Time kept going. It did not heal by magic. It blunted edges. Andrew stopped replaying the lodge porch as if it were a scene from a stranger's film. Rachel stopped trimming the truth at the corners, even the small corners. They figured out that marriage after 40 is not about constant novelty. It is about knowing how to fix the sound when the speakers hiss. Still, now and then, the smell of old wood and a long table and a glance across it came back. Andrew would walk to the vase. If there were lilies in it, shift the stems, add a little cold water, and say out loud with no one around, we did not pick the easy road, but we picked ours. One evening, the boys asked why there were always lilies in their house. Andrew looked at Rachel, and she looked back. He said, because this story is not about flowers. It is about how we learn to call things by their names and stay. Rachel said the lilies remind her to walk toward light, not toward smoke on a porch. The boys shrugged the way boys do. The dog sighed. The house held steady, and that felt like the right kind of ending for now.